All right, and we're live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the House Progressive Caucus. It is Tuesday, April 25th, 2023. And today the House Caucus will be talking a bit about childcare policy and a bit also around the paid family leave policy that's been moving through both chambers this session so far. And we'll get into the meat of that in just a couple minutes. But to get us started, as we normally do in our caucus, I just want to go through just a few little housekeeping logistical issues as we start to get into the zone of wrapping up the session, which is unbelievable to say that. So there's going to be a bit of a change in our expected floor schedule just to members, and starting probably next week, there'll be longer times on the floor, so our day will look a little bit different. So just to anticipate that, and some bit of stopping and starting as bills need to go back into committee and committees of conference start to get formed as we get closer to the end of the session. And there will also be likely a token session or two in the mix as well. And that's just to help advance business going through. And then we will have a training this coming Tuesday, which I think is actually a really good moment for the legislature. It's a training for to really build upon our house discrimination prevention policy that we have. But you might recall in the beginning of the session, we had a wonky walkthrough of the policy. And this is meant to be a bit more of an actual training, educational, professional development, if you will, moment for members to really grapple with what is discrimination and how do we actually learn how to prevent it, see it, prevent it, make sure that we are all adequately educated on it. So we'll likely be in Tuesday morning. I think another outgrowth of this is a bit about trying to also change culture around the committee dynamics when how we also treat witnesses. I'm hoping that's a piece of it. So building a little bit of the work of the Social Equity Caucus and committee protocols, and how do we continue to grow and make sure that we have truly inclusive and safe spaces, not only for the members and staff who work here, but for members of the public who come in and engage with the legislature in this process. Putting a lot on this, but this is the first one. However, it is, I think, a step in the right direction. And CSG, which stands for what?
Council of State Governments.
Thank you. So helpful, co-leader. Council of State Governments will be the trainer, so they have some consultant that actually is well versed in this, as I understand it. So that will be Tuesday. Please come. Please attend. It's important. And then I'm not going to bore you with microphones, but if you have an issue with microphones, let me know about the House floor. That's the least exciting logistical thing. Okay. And with that, let's go around and do some introductions. Is there anything I missed?
No, you got it all.
Awesome. Just crushing it today. All right. Let's start with introductions, and we'll do everyone in the room, and then we'll talk about, we'll transition into the topic of the day. So I'm State Representative Emma Mulvaney-Stanek. I represent Chittenden 17 in the Old North End and New North End of Burlington, and I use she, her pronouns, and I am the chair of the House Progressive Caucus. And I'll go this way, left always.
Hello, my name is Troy Hedrick. I am also a representative from Burlington. I represent Chittenden 15 along with Brian Sheena, kind of in and around campus and then down the hill a bit towards the Old North End. I serve on the Corrections and Institutions Committee. He and him pronouns work well for me.
Thanks. Representative Kate Logan. I use she and they pronouns. I represent Chittenden 16 district along with Representative Krawinski. That's the Central Old North End in downtown Burlington. And I serve on the House Committee on Environment and Energy.
And I'm Kate McCann. I represent Montpelier, and I serve on the House Education Committee and use she and her pronouns.
My name's Sarah. I use she and her pronouns, and I am the legislative assistant for the Progressive House Caucus.
Hi, Michelle Fay. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the executive director of Voices for Vermont's Children.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Kristen Warner. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the public policy manager for Vermont Businesses for Social Responsibility, which is a statewide organization of 700 plus members. And we really look to bring the progressive voice into the business community.
Hello, I'm Sarah Kenny. I'm the Chief Policy Officer at Let's Grow Kids. And I use she, her pronouns, and I live in the Old North End and I'm Mulvaney-Stanek's constituent.
Lucky.
I know, right?
Good afternoon, everyone. Representative Taylor Small, she and her pronouns. I represent Winooski and am the assistant caucus leader here for the Progressive Caucus.
Let's go to our other guest over here. Yeah.
I'm Tom Lapham. I use him, her pronouns. I'm a new volunteer with the Progressive Party.
I'm glad you're here.
I'm Martha Abbott from Underhill, Vermont. I'm the assistant treasurer of the Progressive Party.
Oh, complete.
Hi, I'm Ivo Skorek. I'm from Rutland, Vermont. I am progressive. I'm not a member of the party. And I use he, him pronouns.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for being here. We really appreciate it. And it's important as the Progressive Caucus to have a nice open caucus so we can invite guests and members of the public to just come in and engage with not only us as legislators, but hopefully topics that are of interest to folks. And we hold these every Tuesday at noon. The next 2 weeks, no promises though, as the session starts to wrap up, we might change that just to get through the last 2 weeks. But this is something that we have probably done every week this session and we'll continue next session. So please do come back. Hopefully it's a good time. So for today, we're talking about childcare policy, but also paid family leave. These are two issues that have been finding their way through the process of the legislature this session. Both are such critical issues and really, at least in my mind, are really dovetail around the economic security issues of working Vermonters. And at least for our caucus, are two priority areas that we really are trying to push forward for working folks in Vermont, because they both are so critical on their own. And as I said before, I really see as sort of a two issues that are intertwined. So today we're joined by three guests. We have Sarah Kenny, who introduced herself before, who's the Chief Policy Officer at Let's Grow Kids. We have Kristen Warner from who's the new, but still say that, you are the Public Policy Manager at VBSR. And finally, Michelle Fay, who's the Executive Director of Voices for Vermont's Children. And so what we'll do is just start with each of you for about 3 minutes or so. I'll time you only because I want to make sure there's time for a discussion, because these are two really rich policy areas. And as progressives, we're really curious around how to help advance both successfully forward in their full progressive glory to really make sure that we're advancing the best things possible for Vermonters and not, we talked about this in our platform priorities in the beginning of the session around the tendency for things to be pitted against each other. And I think that's an important thing to name and to make sure that we change that narrative and that framework to really say what is possible and needed, and then push for that and lead for that. So that is certainly the orientation of how we've been thinking of all of our policy work. So I encourage us to kind of go there as the conversation takes us if necessary. So is anyone, I guess I want to start with Sarah since you're closer. That's not a constituent favor, I swear. Or maybe it is, I don't know.
And I have a few PowerPoint slides that I was just going to share just to help kind of frame the context here. And let's see if I can make it go into presenter view. And I should say that because I'm in the Zoom, I can see that Representative Chena is also in the Zoom. So.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Brian, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Representative Brian Chena from Burlington, and I'll be in the room in a matter of minutes. So I'll see you soon.
Great. Thanks, Brian. And thanks, Sarah, for
Yeah, of course. So I'm going to go really quickly through these, but and this is not news to anybody that our childcare crisis impacts everyone, right? Without access to quality, affordable childcare, children are missing out on developmental opportunities. Parents are unable to work or live full lives. Early educators are underpaid and undervalued. Employers are struggling, and our economy is struggling to recover and grow. Whoops, sorry. Catching up, there we go. So just some very basic facts about our crisis in childcare in Vermont right now. 3 out of 5 of our youngest children don't have access to the childcare that they need. Vermont families are spending as much as 30% of their income on childcare, even with state financial assistance. And 86% of center-based childcare programs reported staffing shortages last year. And that is due in large part to the long underinvestment in this field and the fact that those positions are among the lowest paid in our state. So the good news is that there is a bill, S56, that is moving forward, and Representative Small is as expert as I am on it because it just passed out of the Human Services Committee, which is really exciting, and it passed the Senate on a 24-6 vote, which was really exciting. And to sum up, it would change the trajectory of our state by making childcare more accessible and affordable for thousands of Vermont families, would improve quality by increasing professional training, pay and benefits, and respect, importantly, for early childhood educators. So what it does is it focuses kind of on 3 buckets is how I think about it. The first is affordability. So it really changes our state's childcare financial assistance program to support many more families and to flow much more funding into the program. So the Joint Fiscal Office estimated when the bill passed out of the Senate that an estimated 7,700 more children and their families would have access to financial assistance to be able to afford childcare. It also, through this increased infusion of funding, would expand capacity in the state. So childcare programs would be able to open and the existing ones to grow and increase the number of spaces for young children, because we know that's a huge problem right now. And importantly, it would also increase quality. And when I talk about quality, I'm really talking about the folks who are working in those childcare programs, who are experienced early childhood educators. And through increased investment, those programs will be able to provide better pay, benefits, and professional training for their employees and support them in the critically important work that they do. And importantly, S56 also will include a long-term sustainable revenue source that can fund this high-quality childcare system. And that's something that many of us have been working towards for many, many years now. We can talk more about the specifics in terms of the financing, because the Senate had one idea, the House Ways and Means Committee is talking right now about other ideas for how to fund it. So House Human Services voted 10-1-0 in support of the bill, which was really great. The Ways and Means Committee is discussing it, and the Education Committee is discussing the pre-K and after-school parts, and then the bill will go to appropriations. So that's where we're at right now with S56.
Excellently timed. Well done. And I appreciate you starting that off for those of us who are not in human services or on education or Ways and Means. Our offices on the side. So all the committees. We appreciate that. Thank you. Lisa, can I go to you next?
Of course.
BDSR's take on either S56 and or you can choose when and how to bring in paid leave as well. But
okay,
I'd love to hear.
Perfect. It's worth noting that VBSR is in support of both of these bills and these issues about moving forward over reforming the childcare system and making it more available and affordable for Vermont's family and children. And also we are part of an active coalition to move paid leave this year. And so starting with the childcare, I think it's a no-brainer for Vermont's businesses to back this bill. And we see it clearly as an economic development tool and a workplace development avenue. It's clear to us that the pandemic really shook up all of our social systems, and all the cracks and all the failings really just got amplified once you added the pandemic in. And recently, a group called Motherly published a 2022 report that said 46% of women who left the workforce from the pandemic cited a lack of childcare. And what we see and what we know to be true is that the wage gap between genders continues to grow. I think a part of it is a lack of appropriate childcare and a lack of appropriate paid leave that tends to put the caregiving responsibilities onto the shoulders of women, who then get skipped over for promotions, get skipped over for pay increases, and are sort of viewed as more temporary in the workforce. And in fact, the statistics show that they are. And so we think these two policies are a huge lift to female workers, and we can't talk about a diverse workforce unless we're also including the inclusion of everyone, including women. And so to us, we know as business leaders that you have to spend money to make money. And so we apply that same theory to the state budget, where you have to invest money to save money. And we think that both of these issues do just that, and it shouldn't be in either or. In terms of childcare, there is a direct, everyone wants to talk about quality. And we think that the quality of the education and care that children receive is directly related to the quality of the adult in the room. And we know from our business owners that pay is an enormous piece of dignity. It's an enormous piece of recruitment and retention. And so clearly, if there's a lack of adequate programs, we have to look at the pay for early educators. And so that's a huge piece of the bill that our members know in their own businesses. If you pay people better, they will come. And so I think that that's how we can start to address those gaps, is you can't address the lack of childcare without addressing pay. And this bill really does that piece. So that's a huge part of it. And then in terms of paid leave, I have 17 years as a former labor organizer. And so I worked for so many years watching Vermont workers struggle with how to make ends meet and struggle with applying for FMLA, making really hard choices. And both of these bills, really lay out, they really press businesses to the brink around turnover. And it was always so shocking to sit in union negotiations and really dial in on the cost of turnover to businesses. And so we know when you don't have adequate childcare and you don't have adequate family and paid medical leave, that people end up leaving, or their productivity goes down because they're leaving in the middle of the day because they got called, or their spouse is getting chemotherapy and they can't be with them because it's a choice, like the insurance is through that person. Like, this is a very real situation. And so people grapple with being in trouble at work, being disciplined, having to make the choice between being paid or caring for your family, yourself, and a loved one. And that's not a dignified way to live. And that's how Vermonters have been living for years. We think these two policy issues really get to the heart of that. It's good policy, and frankly, it's really good for businesses because it's better to keep trained people in place than to continue to pay into this cycle of recruitment and retention. And so those are just some of the reasons why our business members are supporting both of these bills and doing a considerable amount of work to try to advance them.
A lot easier, although I see Michelle, I don't know.
No, I think I might come well under because I feel like Kristen just did an amazing job laying out the issues.
We're talking a bunch, so I fear not a better discussion, but you take what time you need.
Okay.
Up to 3 minutes.
Great.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So, I don't have a ton to add. I mean, Voices for Vermont's Children is obviously supportive of both initiatives very strongly. We're a pretty small organization, and our coalition is fairly scrappy in terms of our funding. And so we have really focused on lifting up the message around paid leave while also making sure that we're communicating a yes and support for the childcare initiative. I think I was in here earlier a couple months ago or whatever and made the policy case. I think the only things I might add from a child and family well-being component is we've heard a bit about how there's a limit on what Vermonters can afford. And I think that my concern with that framing from the Senate and from the administration is that it ignores the fact that these expenses are being borne right now by individual families, disproportionately by people of color, by women, by low-income families. And so what we're trying to say is let's all share in the cost and make sure that this benefit is available to all of us when we all need it, because we all will at some point in our life, probably multiple times. And there are also very concrete costs right now to the absence of a universal paid leave program. So there's a ton of data from the states that have implemented in advance of us. So 20 years, California's been in place. And we know things like when people don't have access to paid leave, there's a higher low birth weight babies. There's infant mortality is actually higher when there's an absence of paid leave. So there's both moral and sort of actual cost, financial cost to states that don't have this benefit in place. Kristen's talked at great length about the benefits to employers and to retention and workforce connection. And so that's all true and helps support family economic security, which is really one of Voice's primary policy concerns. I don't know what else to say. I feel like that's probably I'll yield the rest of my time back for conversation. If that's okay. It just
never.
Yeah.
It's like that type of session where now it's all those kind of jokes. Yeah. Well, thanks, Michelle. We appreciate that. And we appreciate, there might be more questions too around the coalition, because obviously work gets done in all sort of ways, shapes, and forms in Vermont. And it's important to kind of acknowledge just more than just even the folks at this table who are interested and have been pushing for years, frankly, on both of these topics. So let me open it up to questions and comments from our caucus. Brian?
Yeah, so I wrote it down while you were talking so I could be focused. So we hear a lot about the cost of the proposed services of both childcare and paid family and medical leave, but I haven't seen a lot about the cost of the current lack of support. Like, do you know if there are any numbers out there around what is the cost on society of the current situation which you described, which is that families are struggling with finding childcare and childcare workers are struggling with making a living and people can't take time off or cost on employers. Like if we added up all of those costs, what would that be compared to the cost of the proposed services?
A lot. I don't know that you've done some of it from the childcare perspective. I know from the paid leave perspective, there's some analysis around like the increase, there's a quantifiable increase in people who go on public benefits, for example, go into debt and all the financial kind of snowball that can cause for people. But I don't have a set dollar figure. You might for childcare or an estimate.
We have done some preliminary economic analysis, and we actually, it's not so much the loss, like the cost now, which we know is huge, right? Like hundreds of millions of dollars of lost in terms of economic productivity, just the cost to families. There is actually a calculator. This is a personal anecdote. So my son is now 14, and when he was born, I started looking for childcare, of course, as soon as I was pregnant, because as soon as you get pregnant, people are like, the first thing you should do before you tell your mom is get on all the childcare wait lists, which I did, and we did not find care for him until he was almost 2, because there were no spots available in the greater Burlington area. And there's a calculator online that one of the national organizations runs where you can go on and just for yourself put in the amount of time that you were out of the workforce due to loss of childcare or whatever else was happening, and it will calculate your lifelong economic impacts on you personally in terms of your retirement savings, lost wage increases, all of that, and it's really sobering. I don't necessarily recommend it because it's like too late to do anything about it now, but it's sobering, and so we have done some analysis of that. But the latest economic research that we've done is what would be the economic impact of this investment? Because people in that building seem to be more motivated by like, what could we generate with this kind of investment as opposed to what we're losing right now? So we have done that analysis, and the preliminary analysis was like $99 million in savings for families when we have a system where no family is spending more than 10% of their income on childcare. Almost $213 million in just childcare industry growth. And so it's like $312 million in direct economic impact. And then the indirect economic impacts are hundreds of millions more. So we have numbers, and the RAND report that came out, the legislature passed a bill 2 years ago in 2021, what's now Act 45, that set in motion 2 studies to look at how do we move toward a solution for childcare. And one of them was an economic analysis, it was a financing report about what is the cost of providing actual high quality care for every Vermont child who needs it in an affordable way for families, and then what are the financing options. And so they had some of that same economic impact analysis in that report. We have the data, right? And I'd say it's true for both issues at this point. We have the data around why this is so important. We just need to have the courage to actually make the investment.
I can say there's no shortage of statistics on what turnover,
right.
How turnover impacts businesses, but I think if we look at healthcare, which is a major employer in the state, when there is a call out for an RN on the floor, the hospital is generally paying double time to get anybody to come in. And so when you start to just look at all of the impact when there is an inadequate workforce, you have the precepting costs where you're paying people double. You have a period of time where you're spending enormous amount of money on interviews, lowering productivity of the business. You're paying for advertising to be able to get those jobs needed, the trainings that people need to be able to get into place. And then of course, it's just a morale lower when you have people that are leaving that could have stayed to issues that we all feel and experience, right? So the costs are fairly significant. I think when it's different in every industry, but I think it's fair to say you're looking at every time an employee leaves, you're paying 3 times that person's salary is generally like a good bellwether for the cost of businesses when you can't maintain a steady workforce.
Can I comment on that? And then
Sure, yeah.
I could just quickly I don't necessarily expect you to do the labor to collate all this info, but I appreciate each of you sharing your perspective on it, because I think if my guess is that if we actually did look at the full cost versus benefits of acting versus not acting on providing these benefits, and these services, I think what we might find is it's like something like 10 to 1. And like many other investments in social determinants of health, that if we, although the upfront investment may seem daunting, that the long-term benefits of the investment are so massive that there should be no question.
Right.
You know, that we do this, but I wanted to hear more from your perspectives, because I don't think the government takes the full picture into account enough. So thank you.
Representative Logan?
Yeah, I'd love to just add to this point because I think it's a great question. I think you can look at it from a number of different perspectives, you know, the business case, pretty much any angle, there's a benefit, economic benefit to adopting paid leave and childcare policy like these bills that we have to vote on this year, which I'm very excited about. But I think it's also really important for the sake of addressing sexism in the household. When you look at the gendered wage gap between mothers and fathers in heterosexual relationships, it's 58 cents to the dollar for mothers. Men receive raises when they become fathers. Women get off, you know, sidetracked in their careers. It is, I mean, it's crucial to internalize the cost of reproductive labor, as I would say, to our economy. Similar to, you know, pretending like nature is going to continue to just give us all these ecosystem benefits and, you know, maintain our habitat for us without us paying attention or putting in any effort into maintaining our environment. Assuming that women are going to continue to do free labor for our society. And end up in poverty, as we know from running the minimum wage campaign together a few years back, that most of the women, or the majority of the folks earning minimum wage in Vermont are over the age of 25 and they're women, and most of them are mothers.
Yeah, a lot of them are working in childcare.
And a lot of them are working in childcare or long-term care.
Yeah, some of the most important work in our communities. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of bounce off that a little bit. And, you know, the proposal that came back, the proposal that's in S56 around parental leave from the Senate, you know, initially it was only one parent in a household could access those 12 weeks. And then there were some conversations and it was improved very slightly to be that two parents could, if there are two parents in the household, they could share those 12 weeks. And there's just tons of data from, especially from Europe, where, you know, that's a slight improvement, but it is still all but going to guarantee that that leave is going to be taken exclusively or mostly by the birthing parent, right? And contribute to gender inequities. And then there's like on a more positive note, when there's equal shared access to paid leave, especially in those family formation weeks following the birth of a child. I'm looking at you, but you know this. Sorry, everyone knows this. I'm like intensely looking at you.
I'm in.
Yeah, you know, convinced. But there's all these amazing sort of unquantifiable, not financial benefits to supporting shared family formation, establishing shared duties around domestic responsibilities and parenting. It's good for kids. It's good for marriages, partnerships, whatever it is. Like, it's just good to do. And we have, you know, this may be getting a little bit far afield, but I like to remind people that we're in like a child mental health crisis, and a mental health crisis across the board, maybe. And the more we can do to get families on a firm foundation, both financially and emotionally, that has an enormous cost down the road. And I think there's been a reluctance to do both, the kind of paying for the downstream result of poor policy decisions in decades prior, while also saying we don't want to keep paying for that. So we've got to put in more now and get ourselves caught up with good policy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is there any change to that? Is anybody still looking at amending that so that both parents can grab 12 weeks?
Oh, it's been amended.
Oh, it's, yeah.
It's not in the bill.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's a
Bill
separate
moves its way
policy.
through the House. It's been pulled out of S56.
Yeah, okay, okay.
So there's a childcare bill and then a separate paid leave, medical leave bill.
Okay, okay.
So
Thank you.
just for the clarity for folks watching at home, because S56 is in the House now, it came with both policy ideas in them, childcare and paid family leave in a different form than the House paid family leave bill. But now that Human Services had it, I'll let you finish that sentence. I'm in that committee.
Well, since our committee does not do paid leave, it has multiple stops to go, currently in education, then over to Ways and Means, and then ending in appropriations. There may be some form of paid leave added into it, but that is not our policy jurisdiction. But instead, we were more focused on how we can improve the childcare system and have paid leave be more expansive and not just for family members, but including medical leave and bereavement.
Yep.
I mean, the work that the House did on passing H66, that's a pretty beautiful bill. That's a pretty beautiful and well done, and thank you. And so I think the work is that the coalition sees as really putting pressure on the Senate to pick that up and get moving. I think the House, I mean, it's clear we're in a room of friendly legislators in a body who did the right thing. And so, chipping away at that, it doesn't accomplish the goals that we set out to do. And we don't think it needs to get chipped away at, right? It's good policy, it's long overdue, and it's been tried and true in other areas. And it's time. And I don't think we need to pit really underfunded groups and populations in Vermont against each other on this. There's enough resources to do both. I mean, that's where, VBSR leaders are really comfortable saying that budget is about a priority and who are you picking? And that's sort of the message we're comfortable in the Senate saying is you got to stand on the full side of families and children. And it's doing that looks like both bills. And it looks like both bills this session. And so we're comfortable saying that and are saying that. We hope that you'll join us at a press conference tomorrow at 1 for anybody that really cares about this issue. We'll be in the State House really saying this time has come.
Good to know. Representative McCann, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I was just, if we could turn our attention to the childcare solely for a minute as it enters into, or it hangs around in the Ed Committee where it's at now, and we're starting to talk about universal pre-K. I think, I feel pretty strongly that I agree with the director of pre-K at the Winooski schools, that if we don't bring pre-K into the public schools, we won't be able to achieve equity. But we're also talking about just bringing in the 4-year-olds. And I just wonder about this whole controversy of splitting the 3 and 4-year-olds up and where we kind of sit with that as we discussed that this afternoon in the Ed Committee.
Yeah, it's a complicated one. And I think just to be clear, the bill would preserve our current mixed delivery system. So there's been a lot of conversation about 4-year-olds in public schools, which some schools are able to accommodate a number of 4-year-olds in public schools and pre-K programs. Not all of them are. So that we have a robust mixed delivery system right now where about 60% of the kids who are enrolled in public pre-K receive it in actually in private partner programs in the community. And then there are schools that are also offering pre-K, but from 10 hours a week up to 30 hours a week, depending on where you are. And it is inequitable right now. And Representative Wood, the chair of the Human Services Committee, talks about that a lot, that depending on where you live, your school district might have the resources to be able to offer full day pre-K for 3-year-olds in some places and 4-year-olds. And in other places, the schools just literally do not have the space to have that much pre-K for all the kids in the community. So it's important to preserve our mixed delivery system. And I think that's not been clear in the press coverage. And I know that's really important to House leadership that message get out there, that we are still talking about preserving the mixed delivery system and supporting schools where they can and have the desire to be able to offer full day pre-K. The real shift in the bill, I think, is that it puts the onus on local school districts to make sure that pre-K is available to all 4-year-olds in their district on a full school day, full school year basis. And they can partner with private programs to do that. But That's sort of the big shift. And then the other big shift that's in the bill is that it would remove 3-year-olds from our public pre-K program. We at Let's Grow Kids continue to have concerns about that because we're nationally recognized for the number of 3-year-olds who we serve. It's still a smaller portion of the population, but a lot of states are moving in the direction of offering it to both 3 and 4-year-olds. So that's a little tricky. I think the way that the bill is structured as it came out of Human Services is that there's an implementation committee that's basically going to take the next year and a half to look at how do we move toward this vision and come back to the legislature with recommendations. And so it would require further legislative action to move. But I think I share your concern about removing 3-year-olds from the public pre-K program entirely.
I don't know if I have that concern.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Okay, sorry, but you've heard it, yeah.
My thought is maybe if we push this forward with 4-year-olds, that opens the door for expanding that to 3-year-olds after. Like, I just wonder if the space, if some schools don't have the space for 4-year-olds now.
Right.
Or they could make room for the 4-year-olds now and then expand as we start talking about, our crumbling infrastructure of schools and starting to rebuild schools.
There are a lot of needs and a lot of opportunities in terms of thinking about public pre-K. So I think that there are people who are looking at maybe in a future state, like 10 years from now or something, that there might be the possibility of providing closer to full day pre-K for 3-year-olds in public schools too. And so removing them from the program entirely doesn't make a lot of sense to me either, if that's one of the ultimate goals. I think a concern that we hear a lot from childcare programs, especially those who are currently partnering with school districts to provide public pre-K, is that has been a really critical part of their, the business of childcare in those programs. It's a huge part of their budgets. And they've structured their whole programs to be partners in providing pre-K to 3 and 4-year-olds. So the idea, when there are headlines out there about all 4-year-olds are going to be in public schools, it's really terrifying because we have so consistently and chronically starved the childcare system. So I think it will take some time for the level of investment that's in S56, and then the step 3 is Representative talks about it. Step 1 was H171 Act 45, which set us on this course. This is step 2 is this infusion of resources that'll take us about halfway to what it actually costs to provide high quality care. And that step 3 will be in a couple of years of the next round of investment. And once we get there, it's possible that childcare programs will be stable enough and, be well enough staffed and be able to pay and provide benefits, that a different conversation could be possible then around how we support 3-year-olds in accessing pre-K. But in this moment, it just feels candidly too scary to think about completely removing all 4-year-olds or all 3 and 4-year-olds from the mixed delivery system, because it's part of what's keeping things afloat right now.
So just to back up, as a mother of a 3-year-old, I just want to back up for a quick second. So in the bill right now, is there something that I just want to make sure I get this? There is a proposal to remove 3-year-olds from
the public pre-K program, but that would be part of the work of the implementation committee.
Okay.
Is sort of thinking about how that would work.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
So there's no move in the bill right now. I keep reminding people that this would all require further legislative action in a future year. And the proposal in S56 right now, as it came out of Human Services, is that the implementation committee's report would be due back in December of next year, and any changes would be in the 2025 legislative session for the 26-27 school year, basically.
I wonder if there could just be priority for 4-year-olds, and then if you've got a school that's got the space, also for the 3-year-olds, then welcome them in too, and get that party started.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I think that'll be the work for the implementation committee. It's going to have a lot of work.
Yeah, well, no, I really appreciate that. And I think that, as with really every single bill we touch in policy discussion is around the issues of equity, of course, around where there is space and not, because every community is really struggling with this, and making sure we're just recentering and reminding ourselves what our true values are around supporting young children and the families that have those young children to really be set up for success. Because anyway, so I'm appreciative of that. There's an implementation, there's a study component of this, and that we aren't upsetting the apple cart or whatever of our current mixed delivery system, because so many families, mine included, rely on the existing system in a place where there isn't room for 3-year-olds or 4-year-olds, frankly, to go into at least my public school system. So it's a reality out there. Sorry, total self moment there, but as I think of my 3-year-old who did not have school yesterday, and that was real fun, or preschool. So we only have a couple minutes left, and I just wanted to see if, I had one last question, but I wanted to just offer up. I always try to leave a little room for our guests, if any one of our guests had a question for our folks. Mark?
I had one. What's the total cost of the child care bill, and how much of that is for supplementing tuition for low and moderate income families, and how much of it is for training of childcare workers?
I am going to pull up the fiscal note, unless Representative Small, you remember this off the top of your head.
Well, I know that we balanced the proposal for this year, so that the 79 million, that's 72 million that's currently held in the budget, or at least the one proposed by the House, would cover implementation for this year, and then it was an additional.
I say 145 in the following year, but so the fiscal note from the bills that came out of the Senate is different than what passed the House, in part because the Senate is working with, like the House was working within different budgetary constraints than what the Senate had. So I'm just going to Senate fiscal note.
And did I understand correctly that those are the two places that the money would go to? I didn't hear anything about direct subsidy to the child care centers themselves?
So there are a few pieces. One is increasing reimbursements to the providers, which is focused on, right now we have the STARS system that quality defines how much money is going to the programs themselves. So we're bringing everyone up to the 5-star quality rating. I shouldn't say quality rating, but to the payment of 5 stars, which is about a 38% increase.
38.5% on top of the 5-star.
On top of the
5-star. The child care center itself?
Yes, on behalf of families, yeah.
Okay, so this is the tuition supplement?
Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
as well as an additional 50% increase on top of that for the family child care homes, knowing that there is a disparity currently between child care centers and family child care homes. And so this is taking half of that step to bring them up to parity with child care centers, to make sure that, especially in our rural communities where it's relatively impossible to set up a child care center, that the home providers would still be able to have a robust program for those youth.
Yeah. I love, so it's both. The approach is it's a both and in the bill, and it's really important that the family, cutting costs for families goes in tandem with investments in childcare programs so that they can better pay their staff. So that's why the Child Care Financial Assistance Program is the mechanism through which this funding flows, because it's payments on behalf of families to help them offset costs for their tuition, and the payments are sent to the programs. And so the state will be paying rates to programs that are significantly higher than what they're getting right now. And it would also increase eligibility for child care financial assistance. The House version of the bill would go up to 550% of the federal poverty level, which is way higher than what it is right now, and would put us sort of the most generous in the nation in terms of how many families we're supporting with some level of support to offset costs for childcare. And then there are additional sort of payments in there for childcare programs to get ready for this infusion of funds, and additional quality incentive funds for programs into the future. So there's a lot in there. And so, yeah, it's just pulled up the fiscal note, and it's just under $45 million for the eligibility expansion for early childhood. And then it's important to remember that the Child Care Financial Assistance Program isn't just for early childhood. It also supports access to school age programs, so after school and summer programs for kids up to age 12. So, and then there is another almost $19 million in there this year for readiness payments to programs. So payments out this year to help programs get ready to support this additional influx of families.
Mm-hmm. All right, we have a couple minutes left, and so I just want to throw in sort of a comment reflection again, just in how these two bills are so intertwined. And one of the, I guess, more thematic areas that the Progressive Caucus really tries to push on is around economic justice and working people in general. And so one of the elements around both paid family leave and looking at adequately supporting childcare is that, just going back to one of points that Kristen was making, is that around understanding the power dynamics that are facing working families when you have impossible choices put in front of you around how to take adequate leave to support yourself or your family or extended family members or your children, if there's a loss of childcare, or if your childcare center closes down for too many days, and then you're in this power dynamic struggle of not having enough sick leave. And we've dabbled with this as we've gone through the pandemic, around a time when we actually sort of opened up a possibility of sort of a more communal wraparound approach to supporting working people, and that all shut down once the pandemic started to, the bigger restrictions started to lift. And so the realities, though, are still very stark for working families. So I appreciate these two bills really changing. It will start to change the power dynamics that so many folks who don't have access to unions, also a former union organizer, face constantly, which is an added stressor, which does not even talk about the economics at all, but the power struggle of trying to even just take leave and adequately support children and raising them in this state, which is impossible already with the cost of living. And it also just reflects, I've heard this a lot over the years too, current day reality of the cost of childcare and the current day reality of what it takes to make a living in this state, because it's so different than it was even 20 years ago. And I sometimes look at my colleagues in the House and the Senate, and their childcare realities 20 years ago was very different than those facing families today. And I think we do better by Vermonters today if we actually pay attention to what people's real economic realities are today, and not just default to our own personal experiences whenever that might have been, when it was enough to be one.
This control wanted to highlight.
Yeah. Brian, Kate, you want the last word?
Oh, I was just going to say, I don't know how people had better experiences with childcare 20 years ago. My oldest is 20 now, and high quality, comprehensive childcare where I lived when she was a baby was $20,000 a year, which was 4 times the cost of college tuition. And it was impossible for me. I found a way, but it was by going back to grad school at the University of Oregon, where there was family housing with a family child care center, and the students of the University of Oregon had decided in the 1980s to provide subsidies to student parents. So I paid $200 a month for Reggio Emilia childcare that was wraparound with my public school. And so I've experienced what it can be like, but I wouldn't have gone back to grad school if I hadn't been able, or if it had been possible for me to afford childcare. But $20,000 in 2002.
Right now.
I have a question.
It's really cool. You have to get going. Yeah.
To add to your experience, I moved actually from New York City to Vermont when my child was born, because here my wife and me could get health insurance and food stamps and everything. In New York City, it was much harder because Vermont always had higher percentage of poverty level, that we could get. So, but yeah, childcare was a problem. We had to pay out of our own pocket. And, my wife used to have a better job in New York City, so she provided money. And then when my son went to school, he started competing in snowboarding, and I spent winters with him homeschooling him. And then I realized, if he goes to public school, his schooling is paid. And if he goes to, if we live in a city without a school, then state pays tuition to the school. But if he's homeschooled, I don't get anything, I spend a lot of time and my own resources to do this with him without much help, I don't know how it is now. Does this bill include some help to parents who actually homeschool?
It doesn't, and we're happy to talk a little bit more offline too, because we just have to wrap up, but it doesn't unfortunately include that piece, so, yeah.
See, that's
It's all part of it.
another piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, lots of pieces, yeah. Thanks, everyone, for coming here. Extra thanks to our guests for being here.
I have
Good luck.